Us today on this International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. 416 days ago, on October 7th, Hamas terrorists unleashed unprecedented violence on Israel. Hundreds of Israeli women were killed, 92 were taken hostage, and 13 women still remain captive in Gaza. Today, we want to focus on these women and discuss how violence against women is being used as a weapon of war. With us today, we have relatives of victims: Shani Louk, Damari, Doron Steinbrecher, and Arbel Yehoud. The parents of Daniela Gilboa were also supposed to be with us, but due to unprecedented, unexpected development, they couldn't travel. We are thinking about them today. Ms. Tal Hochman, who is on my right, will also shed light on what the civil society in Israel, especially the women's organizations, women's rights organizations, have been operating ever since the attack. Let me now give the floor to Ambassador Daniel Meron for short opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Natan, and thank you all for joining us today. 13 Israeli women still remain hostage in the brutal hands of Hamas terrorists in Gaza. It's been already 416 days. And with us today are the parents of Shani Louk, who have been murdered, and other members of families of women who are held captive in Gaza. They are here to break the deafening silence of the United Nations on the plight of Israeli women who have been murdered, raped, mutilated, abused in so many ways. They have come here to call for the release of their loved ones and of all the 101 hostages who remain in Gaza. Unfortunately, the United Nations has taken too long to address the violence, the sexual violence, the gender-based violence committed by Hamas, while the videos, pictures, and testimonies of these atrocities were circulating live. And the UN is doing too little to tackle this seriously and forcefully. 1 year later, there is still not a single UN resolution condemning Hamas, and particularly condemning the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war. That is shameful. Let me be clear, Hamas crimes, and particularly the sexual and gender-based abuses, violate all basic norms and values. In any country, in any religion, it violates such rules. The actions of the terrorists, of the Hamas terrorists, are not actions of freedom fighters, like some would like to portray the Hamas, but actions of brutal terrorists who do not care about human life and dignity. Unfortunately, the UN is not the only organization that has experienced a moral eclipse. The outrageous decision of the ICC last week has turned universal justice into mockery. For the past year, for the past 13 months, time and again, the UN and other international bodies have failed the Israeli people, have failed the Israeli women. On this day, I urge the UN, every representative of the UN, to speak out unequivocally and demand the immediate release of all 101 hostages. It is time for the UN to redress its moral compass and to act. On this day, the day of the International Day on Elimination of Violence Against Women, we remind the world here of the plight of the Israeli women, of those who suffered from the Hamas attack on the 7th of October, and those who are still in the hands of the Hamas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I'll give now the floor to Ricarda Louk, the mother of Shani Louk. Her picture and the footage of Shani have been among the first images the world has seen on October 7. And I will let Ricarda and Nissim tell a bit more about their daughter.
Thank you. I'm Ricarda, the mother of Shani. I want to tell you what happened to us on the 7th of October. We were around 6:40 in the morning. We got the rocket alarms. Our daughter Shani wasn't with us because she said she's going to a party, a festival with her international friends from Mexico, Guatemala. She was there with a group of young people to dance, hear music, celebrate with people. She was a very happy and independent woman, and when we heard the alarms, we thought, oh, let's see where Shani is, and let's give her a call. And my oldest daughter called her, and she said, yeah, I'm still in the south in the festival, and there are rocket alarms here, so I'm going to take my car now, and we're going to leave from here as quick as possible. And at the beginning, we weren't so much worried, but after some time, she didn't answer her phone anymore. And then we started seeing all kinds of videos in social media about terrorists coming into Israel and shooting in the cities. And so it starts to worry. We started to worry, really, and she didn't answer her phone, and we didn't know what to do. And around 10:30 in the morning, suddenly my son started to scream and cry because somebody sent him a video, and they said it looks like Shani, and he immediately recognized her in the video. And also my little son, my 15-year-old son, saw it, and my oldest daughter, and we all saw this horrific video where Shani is really lying upside down on the pickup truck of the terrorists, half naked, 4 armed terrorists around her, some pushing her down with a foot or grabbing her hair, and they were driving towards Gaza, and we recognized this is inside Gaza already. She's not in Israel even anymore. And we were completely shocked. She was driving there in Gaza, and there were hundreds of people around the truck celebrating, and she was like a trophy. They pulled her by the hair, and they spit on her, and it was really horrific for us to see, and our whole world broke down at this moment. And we couldn't imagine how our little girl came to be there now in Gaza in this situation, and we all broke down, really. And nobody should experience such a thing, especially when a girl goes to a dance festival, normal, official festival with 3,000 people all over the world who are coming to this festival. And at the beginning, we thought she was still alive, and we hoped that she's still alive. And because I'm German, I grew up in Germany. She had a German passport, so I said, let's try to work with the German embassy and to get her out there. Maybe they have better connections than the Israeli people. And we got an immediate response from them, but nobody could help us, really. Nobody had any influence, and we were really feeling like the hostage families that still feel like this, that their loved ones are still there, and it can drive you crazy because in the night you hear the bombs attacks. We hear it from our place, the attacks of the Israeli side already, and you hear it and you think, where is my daughter? Is she in a hospital? Is she in a tunnel? What are they doing to her? What's happening to her? And it just drives you crazy as a parent. And we did everything. We went to Germany. We met the chancellor. We met the foreign ministers, different parties. We went to the United States. But nothing really helped. And after 3 weeks, we found out that she's not alive anymore. The army told us that they found a piece of her skull on the Israeli soil. So we knew that she died in the beginning, and she didn't suffer so much. At least she wasn't hostage there in Gaza. And they still kept the body captive. We didn't have a grave. We couldn't even mourn properly because there was no body. And we weren't sure that the body is coming back, even with all the problems there. And after 8 months, they recovered the body in a tunnel in Jabalia under a building that was donated by the German bank to UNRWA. And her body was found in this specific building in a tunnel 10 meters deep, and it was unimaginable. But at least we had some kind of closure, and we could bury her. And yeah, and maybe my husband wants to talk a little bit more.
Hi everyone, my name is Nissim and I'm the father of Shani, Louk. Shani, my daughter, is half German and half Spanish, Jewish Spanish, because my my family lived in Spain for 1500 years in the city of Lugo. So when I say Shani, I mean you, yourselves. We are the same. She's European as you are. The last time that you've seen the picture of Shani, I'm sure it was a big shock for you. You know, you saw a little girl, half naked kind of, on the back of a Toyota pickup. The Toyota was driving towards Gaza, and I'm sure each one of you thought to himself, something is wrong with the world if we see such a thing. And of course, think how a father sees his daughter in the same situation. This is very, very difficult. The car that she was lying on, this white Toyota pickup, was driving into Gaza. And when I saw it, I said, you know, our world has changed. And you see the people of Gaza, the civilians people of Gaza, and also the militants, the terrorist people in Gaza, they were celebrating, they were dancing. They gave, you know, candies to the children. They gave cookies to the children. And they saw Shani as a trophy. And not only Shani, all the people that were kidnapped from Israel, when they came into Gaza, it was a huge celebration. And now this celebration became, you know, of the people of Gaza became a cry. They cry. And the people of the United Nations forgot about the 7th of October, and they see the cry of today of the people that came into Israel, conquered, they broke the border, they conquered villages, they raped, they killed babies, they killed older people, grandfathers, grandmothers, babies, they burned people. And the people of the United Nations forgot about the 7th of October, and now he remembers what happens to the people of Gaza. You know, on the 8th of October, there was a picture all over Europe on the main newspapers. You saw Shani, a beautiful girl, on one side. In the back there were the Alps mountain, and there was a small picture of the terrorists that took her, that kidnapped her and murdered her. And it was written there, look at this barbarian, what they did to our German girl. And I want to ask you guys, this picture is a very strong picture. If you show it to a little baby, little kid, and you ask him, what do you see in this picture? Every kid will say, oh, look at this beautiful girl. Look what they are doing to her. Why do they do it? Because this is a basic picture. This picture means good and bad, life and death, beauty, youth, power, and evil, and destruction. And you have to remember this picture whenever you think about what happened on the 7th of October, about who you are. Who do you want that your kids will be? Who do you want that you will be? You want to be the life, or you want to be the death, and you have to choose. And you know, the people of the United Nations are blaming a lot the Israeli government, about what happens. But you must know that the United Nations have a part, and a major part, in what happened in Israel. I'll tell you why. The bullet that killed my daughter, 78 cents. You can Google it. It's a Kalashnikov bullet, 78 cents. The Kalashnikov that killed, the machine gun that killed my daughter, it's around $700. The tunnels under Gaza, millions of dollars. The people of Gaza are poor people, they are fishermen. Where do they get all that money? So much money to build and to build terror. From you guys. You have a very good heart. You donate a lot of money to the people of Gaza. But you don't follow the money, what they do with that money. And what they did? Terror. Machine guns, tunnels, kidnapping, everything that is wrong in the world. At the moment, there are more than 100 hostages in the tunnels of Gaza. And when they brought my daughter, and when they told us that she was dead, I was relieved. Because as a father, it's very hard for a father to think what happens in the tunnels of Gaza for a 22 years beautiful girl. The rapes, the torturing. So for me it was easier, to know that she died on the 7th of October and she didn't go into this hell, because this is hell. And you yourself have to decide who you are. Who do you want that your kids will be? Who do you want to be? And who do you support? Because Israel, it's the last, we are fighting for the Western world. And if we fall, the Western world will fall. And if the Western world falls, what happened to these girls and beautiful kids of Israel, what happened to them on that day can happen in Europe. And you have to make sure that it will not happen in Europe, because believe me, I don't want that any father or any mother will feel the way we felt that day. And this is what I want to pass to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Nissim and Ricarda. And I know that this image on the pickup has even won a journalist prize, and how much pain it adds also for you. And the difficulty to overcome this. And I would like to hand the floor to Yamit Ashkenazi and Doron Steinbrecher, the siblings of Doron Steinbrecher.
Hello everyone, and thank you for coming here today. My name is Doron Steinbrecher, and this is my sister Yamit Ashkenazi, and we are the brother and sister of Doron Steinbrecher. On October 7th, my little sister was kidnapped from her apartment in Kibbutz Kfar Aza. On that morning, she called my mom, crying. She said, "Mom, I'm scared. I'm hiding under the bed in the safe room, and I can hear the terrorists trying to go inside my apartment." On the moment she was kidnapped, she managed to send a voice message to her friends in WhatsApp. I want you to hear that voice message. It says, "They caught me, they caught me, they caught me." And you can hear the Arabic shouts in the background. For the last 416 days, my little sister is in Hamas captivity in Gaza, in an underground tunnel, without food, without water, without enough oxygen, without medication she must take on a daily basis. We've met with the Red Cross a few times and told them the exact type of medication that my sister needs, but unfortunately, until this moment, she didn't get it. 416 days that my little sister is in hell without basic humanitarian conditions. The last sign of life we had from Doron was in January, when Hamas released a video of her. You can see the photo from that video. You can see the difference between how she was before the October 7th and how she looked in the video. We saw that she's alive, but you can see that she's in terrible condition. She's looked thin, pale, lost a lot of weight. And at that moment, more than 9 months has passed, and we don't know if Doron is alive, injured, or dead. With each passing day, I fear she's fading away on those dark tunnels. I'm not just scared, I'm angry. Angry that the world seems to have moved on while Doron and 100 other hostages are still in Hamas captivity. You must be the voice of them. You must be the voice of my little sister and all of the other hostages. You must do everything you can to make sure the world will never forget that my little sister and 100 other hostages are still in Hamas captivity. The atrocities that happened in Israel can happen all over the world, in Europe, in America. So you must do everything you can to make sure that it will never happen, and make sure that my little sister and all of the other hostages will be released as soon as possible. Thank you.
Hello. As my big brother says, I am the older sister, of Doron Steinbrecher, but I am also a survivor of the massacre in Kibbutz Kfar Aza on October 7th. I spent 21 hours in the safe room with my husband, my 2 beautiful, innocent children, Libby, she's 7 years old, and Roy is 4 years old. And we are stay for 21 hours in the safe room without enough water, without enough food. We couldn't get out to go to the toilet, and we stay there while terrorists are trying brutally break into my home to kidnap us or to murder us. I lay on my children to protect them, and my husband was standing in the door, holding 2 knives and waiting for the terrorists to come in, waiting to fight and hopefully to save us. The terrorists invaded and occupied my kibbutz Kfar Aza, my piece of heaven, where I grew up, where my children were born, where they took their first steps. 64 members of my community were brutally murdered. 19 were kidnapped, most of them returned in the first deal in last November. But we are still waiting for 5 to come home: Gali and Ziv Berman, Emily Damari, Kit Siegel, and my little sister Doron, and of course, all the other hostages to come home. But I'm here also as the voice of Doron, my little sister, and as the voice of the other 100 men and women who are still being hostage in Gaza. It's been 416 days. Even if I go back and say 416 days, it's not a number that you can process or you can realize how much days and hours and minutes and seconds that they are there. Today is the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women. Hostages who have returned bravely and powerfully share their stories of sexual abuse, rape, physical, mental, and sexual abuse. As an older sister, as a mother, as a woman, I want to ask you, global men and women, where are you? Where is your voice? How are you able to stand silent on the sideline while this horror happening to 101 women and men that are still held hostage by terrorists? Even in this specific moment that we are here talking about them, fighting for them, screaming for them, I don't know if our beautiful little sister is alive. We really hope so, but we have no sign of life from Doron. What I do know is that she's in a danger sexual assault right now. She could be raped right now, murdered right now. And we must do everything, you must do everything to get them out of there. When you go home tonight and hug your loved ones, your daughter, your wife, your husband, I want you to remember Doron. Remember the 101 hostages who can do the same. Until they are home, we are all failing them. The world is failing them. We've seen that a deal is the only path to bring our loved ones home safely. Until that deal is signed, until I can hold my sister in my arms again, we cannot and we must not stop fighting. I will never lose hope of seeing Doron back again, her smile, her laugh, her boundless love for life. This memory keeps us going. Let Doron's story and the stories of all the hostages fuel your determination to act. In the name of humanity, in the name of justice, and in the name of my sister Doron, help us to bring them home now. Thank you.
Thank you, Yamit, and thank you, Dor. Let me now give the floor to Maayan Westland, close friend from Arbel Yehoud.
Hello. My name is Maayan. Arbel is my best friend since the day we were born in Kibbutz Nir Oz. Arbel is being held hostage for the past 416 days. I'm here on behalf of Arbel's family. The parents asked me to come here because while they are working tirelessly to bring Arbel home in every single way they can think of, they are mourning their firstborn, Dolev, Arbel's brother, who was murdered on October 7th. Dolev went out on that Saturday, leaving his wife 9 months pregnant at that time and their 3 children, and tried to help the wounded. He was a volunteer of Magen David Adom, a rescue union. And try to imagine Arbel's parents waking up in the morning, knowing their son will never come back, having that piece of their heart broken, and then having to take a deep breath and do everything in their power to keep the hope and fight for a different ending for their daughter. Arbel is 29 years old. I really wish to describe her, not leaving her name in a photo, but it's really hard. I can say Arbel is a force of nature. She has that smile that immediately makes you feel warm inside. She's the best auntie to her niece and nieces. She's a role model to them, and she's just a fire energy, and really the best friend you can ask for. Arbel was kidnapped from her home on that Saturday together with her boyfriend, a partner, Ariel Cunio, who's also from our kibbutz, Kibbutz Niroz. The Hamas terrorists broke into their safe room, shot their puppy, Murph. They adopted her just a few weeks before as a statement of their future mutual life. Arbel was kidnapped along 75 other people, babies, children, men, women, elderly from our kibbutz. 25% of our small community was either murdered or kidnapped on that Saturday. Try to imagine your large family, 25% of them vanishing at a single day. I spoke to with Arbel via text on that Saturday since 6:30 when it all started. She was terrified. She was shaking. She thought of Dolev, her brother. She knew he will come out and try to help others. She heard the shouts and the gunfires. She heard the terrorists under their window. She and Ariel, her boyfriend, were hiding under their bed. I wasn't in the kibbutz today. I was trying to calm Arbel down and telling her everything will be fine, because I thought everything will end differently. At the same time, I spoke to my parents who survived the massacre of the October 7th. And then around 8:47, Arbel stopped answering, and we lost any connection of her, both me and her mom. We do not know how Arbel was kidnapped. We don't have any footage or video of that. At this time, 416 days after, her family has more questions than answers. And the uncertainty and the testimonies from the women who came back in the last deal last November, raising heartbreaking thoughts of what Arbel and all the other women and all the other hostages being through for the past 416 days. Last week, Yehi is Arbel's father. He addressed her during a discussion in the Israeli Knesset, and he wrote her a letter. He said, "My dear Arbel, the uncertainty surrounding your physical safety drives us mad, but it is nothing compared to the uncertainty you are enduring. My child, did you sleep last night? Are your captors hurting you? What do they demand you to do in exchange of a piece of bread or water? Are you terrified by these sounds? Do not break. Knowing that you are holding on to ops gives us the strength in our fight to your freedom." Just a few weeks after the October 7th, Arbel's mother asked me to go back to Niroz, to Arbel and Ariel's house, and get any meaningful things that I can find. I went there, saw the blood from the puppy, saw the mess, saw all the glasses on the floor, and I took everything I could find, photos, things I know she loves. And I was wondering to myself whether I'm picking those things in order to bring her back to her, or will it just be her family memories of her? I'm a social worker in my profession. Fighting for rights, for my patients' rights, is my daily basis job. And I'm feeling absurd doing my job while my best friend, human rights, are being bluntly ignored and violated. Last November, Shani, who is a dear friend of Arbel and mine from the kibbutz, came back in the last deal. She was 55 days in captive. She was also kidnapped from the kibbutz. Shani changed a lot after 55 days there. And I'm wondering now, 416 days, not whether Arbel has changed a lot. I'm wondering if there's something left from the Arbel I know, from her soul. I'm sitting here and Arbel is there, but it could have been me. It could have been any of us here. And I believe that is the meaning of this day, the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women. The only things that matters is that they are human beings, they are women, and they are deserved to be home and safe. Arbel's father is addressing her into interviews saying, I hope you're not alone there. And I think this is our job, not to let Arbel and all the other hostages feel alone. It's my and your obligation to make their voice, because they can't do it themselves. You need to scream their suffering, and you need to do everything in your power to make a change and get him back home. The community of Niroz cannot rehabilitate until all the other 29 hostages from Niroz and all the other 101 hostages will return home. I'm asking you not to fail Arbel, not to fail all the hostages. Don't leave her alone. Don't ignore their human rights. Do everything in your power to stop it. Fight for their rights to be back home. Thank you.
Thank you, Maayan. And yes, definitely the uncertainty, I think, is what is extremely painful for all of you who have either seen videos of your loved one through propaganda videos or have not heard anything for the past 416 days. I'd like now to hand the floor to Mandy Damari, the mother of Emily.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, in a minute that clock there will change and it will say 10 minutes. And I'll have 10 minutes. There it goes. Time's up. It's even time's up, it says. Even press it again. I'll have 10 minutes to stand, to sit here with you, to speak with you. But I want to express my gratitude to every one of you here today who have set their time aside for us to come and listen. And it's a gesture that's far from being taken for granted. And we are profoundly moved that you are here. So thank you very much. As you can tell, I'm quite nervous. I don't like speaking publicly. My name's Mandy Damari, and I was born in the United Kingdom. I moved to Israel when I was 25 years old, when I met my husband, and I stayed there mainly because the weather was good. But I'm here before you, a mother whose heart has been shattered for over a year, and my daughter Emily, who's a dual British-Israeli citizen and the only British hostage left that's still captive, was taken hostage by Hamas on October the 7th, 2023, when they launched their brutal attack on kibbutz Kfar Aza, where I'd lived with my family for 30 years. We were just 3 kilometers from the Gaza Strip. On that horrifying day, my family and I, including 2 of my grandchildren, aged then 3 and 5, were trapped in our homes in fear of our lives, with rockets and guns being fired all around us. Since then, I haven't been able to live in my house. It's got no windows or doors and bullet holes in the floors and walls, and my family are all internally displaced people, as the UN likes to call us, and we cannot return until the war is over and my house is repaired. 64 of our friends and neighbors were murdered, many of them in my street where I lived. 19 were kidnapped, including women and children. And today, 5 are still held hostage. Gali, Ziv, Keith, and Doron. And Emily. Emily's my youngest child. She's the light of our family. She's full of life and joy, or she was. She was brave, funny, charismatic, and spontaneous. She's always been the type of person who lights up a room with her energy and warmth. She has a gift for connecting with people, a deep emotional intelligence that draws others to her. That Emily, the vibrant, courageous young woman I love, is now being robbed of her very essence. Emily turned 28 in captivity. Her birthday passed in the dark confines of a tunnel, likely 20 meters underground, and I imagine her every day. Suffering from thirst, starvation, and the unimaginable cruelty of torture, mentally, physically, and perhaps sexually. She has no privacy, no light, and perhaps no connection to anyone else. And the thought of her enduring head and body life stripped of every comfort and dignity, unable to change her clothes or to relieve herself without someone watching her, haunts me every second. This is not a life. It's a nightmare. It's a living nightmare. Every second she remains in Gaza, her life's in danger. My worst fear is that her captors' patience will run out and they will take her life, or perhaps a bomb will fall on the very place where she's held. If Emily returns to us, I fear it may be only in a body bag. The United Nations is known for its mandate in defending human rights and delivering humanitarian aid around the world, for protecting those who cannot protect themselves. You cannot allow this situation to continue anymore. Emily deserves to live, to laugh and to come back to the people who love her. And I ask you, every one of you, to remember Emily and all the hostages who are still suffering while you talk about human rights and humanitarian aid, because at the moment they are getting neither of these things. Despite being injured in her hand and leg by gunshots and shrapnel, you have failed in your mandate, and you've not been able to release her from captivity to be treated for her wounds. The UN, with all of its discussions about the humanitarian crisis in the Middle East, particularly in Israel, has not even been able to give us a simple sign that Emily or any of the remaining hostages are still alive. Emily always taught me in her optimistic way that I should never give up hope, and I still have a sliver of the hope remaining. So I'm asking you now, for the second time this year, because I came here in February and nothing has changed, and because the conditions of the hostages have become worse and not better. Do not remain silent. Do more. Speak out for Emily and all of the hostages still held in captivity. Demand their safe release immediately and unconditionally. Don't let me think this is really only a game played about money and political interests, and the hostages are just used as pawns until there will no longer be any pawns left to play in the game. My family and I cannot bear another day of this agony. And Emily, who I always say in every speech I love to the moon and back, cannot endure another moment of her captivity. She and all of the 100 hostages held illegally in Gaza need your help now to return home. Remember the real reason that the United Nations was formed for originally. Remember your mandate. Use it and return my daughter to me alive immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. We've heard different stories of women, of communities, of families. Stories we can all relate to. And yet, I look at this room and we're so grateful for all of you who are here today. But so many chairs are empty. So many chairs of colleagues who day long call for caring for human rights, for humanitarian affairs. And when 4 families, 5 now, so Daniela, who is also with us, who come time and again calling for help. And so many seats are empty. So I think it's important for all of us to think of what we can do individually as government representative, as organizations, if there are any international organizations represented here, as civil societies, to speak out and act. 460 days are extremely long, and I can't realize what all of you have been living through. So we urge you to do whatever you can and do more, because I'm sure we can all do more, so they come back home. And now we'd like to introduce you to Tal Hochman, who is the executive director of the Israeli Women's Network, a leading NGO in Israel, who's advocating for gender equality for the past 30 years. But since October 7th, there has been a completely new approach to this work, specifically focused also on the sexual and gender-based violence perpetrated on and since the terrorist attack. This is also why the DINA project has been established, and to which you, Tal, is part of. So I'll give now the floor to Tal to tell us more about what has been happening in Israel from the civil society perspective, what's been happening on collecting evidence of sexual and gender-based violence, and understanding what civil society, but also international organizations and other partners across the world can do, not only about sexual violence being used as a weapon of war in Israel, but in so many other situations around the world. And I think this is a key element of the discussion. So I'll just hand back the floor to Tal.
His Excellency Ambassador Meron, thank you for inviting me to speak on this critical subject of conflict-related sexual violence. And thank you all for coming and listening to all of us. My name is Tal Hochman, and I am the Executive Director of IWN, Israel Women's Network, an Israeli NGO that advocates for policy change to advance the legal, social, and political equality of women. The 25th of November has always been a significant date, devoted to discussions of what more can be done to reduce all types of violence against women. But today, the 25th of November has added significance because there is still Israeli hostages in captivity who are, as we speak, subject to conflict-related sexual abuse. Since the dawn of history, sexual violence has been used systematically as a weapon of war in various global conflicts, where women's bodies became a symbolic battlefield of the war being fought by two opposing groups. Perpetrators, often operating with impunity, exploit the vulnerabilities of mostly women and children, employing sexual violence as a tool to achieve military and political objectives. These acts are often designed to instill fear, displace populations, destroy social fabric, and exert dominance over targeted communities. The intention is to achieve political aims that have nothing to do with the desire to satisfy sexual appetites. Instead, conflict-related sexual violence is designed to create political dominance, erase the victim's national dignity, encourage the victims and their families to permanently leave their place of residence, and even depress the victim's desire to reproduce. Despite that, many international organizations remain silent and even deny the conflict-related sexual abuse of October 7, and rarely called for the ceasefire for the release of the hostages who we know continue to suffer from such abuse in captivity. By refusing to see the acts of sexual violence that were committed on October 7 for what they were, namely crimes against humanity, in the form of weaponization of rapes, they send a terribly dangerous message of a license to use sexual violence as a tactic of war. But perpetrators must always be held accountable. It is the obligation of the UN and its members. And I am here today to tell you that there is no doubt that these crimes happened on October 7. Immediately after October 7, I volunteered as a social worker at Shura, a military base in central Israel, which was set up as an ad hoc site to where all the bodies of the victims of the attack were transferred for initial identification. In the first hours of the attack, thousands of videos and images were live-streamed on social media and made it clear that sexual violence was taking place. It was there at Shura that I understood that simply because of the large number of bodies coming in and the Jewish importance of swift burial, it was not going to be possible to document all the crimes, and that the stories of some of the victims would never be told in full. We would never know or understand the full extent of the picture because the fact were being buried with the victims before being documented. But I strongly felt that we had a responsibility to the victims to do everything we could to investigate and document what had happened to them. I am part of 2 working groups dedicated for this investigation. One is the Women in War Collective, which has been focusing on documenting and corroborating evidence of the conflict-related sexual crimes that were committed on October 7. The second group is the Dina Project, which is addressing the challenges in pursuing recognition and justice for the victims through legal proceedings. The groups include experts from academia, senior female lawyers, former female civil servants in top public service roles, and feminist activists. The investigation of the conflict-related sexual crimes that were committed during and after the October 7 attack posed significant challenges. The majority of the victims are no longer alive, and for those who survived, it will take years before they are able, if at all, to recount their ordeal. In cases of sexual violence in general, especially conflict-related sexual violence, it takes time for victims to gather enough strength and confidence to report what had happened to them. Eyewitnesses to the event themselves are trauma victims, and many witnesses are still involved in combat. Moreover, in those first few days after October 7, the sites of these crimes were places where the battles continued and where desperate attempts were being made to locate the missing and the deceased, and there was little regard for preserving forensic evidence. We set out to compile all the information available from all the open source materials that were related to the sexual abuse committed on October 7. We cross-checked each piece of information, corroborated and checked the credibility of the claims, and identified the sites of the crimes. Our sources include testimonies of survivors, eyewitnesses, and first responders, forensic professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, and social workers. We scanned all the information published on traditional social media, investigative reports, documentary films, reports, and meetings with representatives of international organizations, including the team headed by Pramila Patten, UN Special Representative on Sexual Violence and Conflict, and reports by the COI and Human Rights Watch, and by Israeli NGOs. We also included the videos that the terrorists themselves filmed on the GoPro cameras that they wore specifically to terrorize Israeli society. And finally, an important source of information was the testimonies of the hostages who returned to Israel on November 2023. Most of the returned hostages needed time before they were able to speak about the sexual violence they suffered, and some remain unable to talk about their experience even now, 1 year after the release. This vast volume of evidence unequivocally shows that severe sexual violence acts were perpetrated against women and men on October 7 at various locations, including rape, gang rape, sexualized torture, and sexualized cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment. The evidence that we compiled aligned with a report by the mission headed by the UN Under-Secretary General Pramila Patten, which found clear and convincing evidence of severe sexual violence acts, including rape, torture, and humiliation. This team found, and I quote, "People were shot, often at close range, burned alive in their homes as they tried to hide in their safe rooms, gunned down or killed by grenades in bomb shelters where they sought for refuge, and hunted down on the Nova Music Festival site as well as in the fields and roads adjacent to the festival ground." Other violations included sexual violence, abduction of hostages and corpses, for public display of captives, both dead and alive, the mutilation of corpses, including decapitation, and the looting and destruction of civilian property. I want us all to take a moment to think about the plight of these women who remain in captive today, who are subject to continued sexual abuse, and for the past 416 days have been held in inhumane conditions in tunnels underground, with little air and food and no medical attention. What does it mean to be a victim of conflict-related sexual violence? What does it mean to be a hostage who has been subject to such sexual violence continuously for more than a year? Amit Susna, who returned from Hamas captivity in November 2023, said, "He came toward me and shoved the gun at my forehead. Her captor forced her to remove her towel after allowing her to wash herself for the first time in weeks, groped her, sat her on the edge of the bathtub, and hit her. He dragged her at gunpoint back to the room, and then, with a gun pointed at me," she said, "forced me to commit a sexual act on him." Captivity creates by design a state of existential powerlessness and insecurity. The hostages in captivity are in constant fear of a repeat of the worst nightmares that they have already lived through. They live with the sense that their own body has betrayed them, and as a result suffer from a range of somatic symptoms. The hostages who returned describe being held in solitary confinement, being given false information regarding the destruction of the State of Israel, the separation of siblings and of children from their parents, and being forced to view horrific footage of the murder and mutilation of their own family and friends. The trauma endured by those in captivity is considered among the harshest and most difficult from which to recover. The longer that our hostages remain in captivity, the more difficult it will be for them to heal. But this trauma is not just personal. Conflict-related sexual violence also creates additional circles of victims, the victims' families, and society at large. In fact, creating collective trauma is precisely the intention behind the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war. Psychology experts describe the terrorization and paralyzation effects that enforced disappearance have on the entire society. On October 7, this societal trauma was compounded by Hamas's use of technology. Specifically, GoPro cameras were used to live stream atrocities on social media, including executions and torture of civilians. Healing is not a simple task, but at its heart, it is a social matter rather than an individual one. Healing is more than a private undertaking by the survivor. It is also a problem and a matter of public recognition and not just personal suffering. Therefore, healing also depends on what the members of the UN do to prevent and address conflict-related sexual violence. We must stand behind all the victims and bring them justice. The horrible fact is that the case of October 7 is not unique. Sexual abuse in conflict has happened many times in human history and continues today all over the world. And as long as the world does nothing, it will continue. Therefore, me and my colleagues are calling for the development of the adoption of an international protocol that outlines the specific actions states must take in the events on conflict-related sexual violence. Today, existing international law contains provisions that address sexual violence in conflict. For example, according to the Geneva Convention, all states have a legal duty to take measures to put an end to conflict-related sexual violence. The Rome Statute of International Criminal Court, for instance, recognizes rape, sexual slavery, enforced prostitution, enforced sterilization, and other forms of sexual violence as war crimes and crimes against humanity. And a series of UN Security Council resolutions emphasizes the need to protect women and girls from gender-based violence in conflict, which is recognized as a violation of international law and tactic of war, designed to humiliate the enemy, instill fear, and undermine its morale. But there are several factors that hinder the adoption of and implementation of the needed policies and procedures. There are gaps in international law, as well as lack of political commitment and resources allocated at national legal institutions to effectively address conflict-related sexual violence. There is also a lack of cooperation between all stakeholders, which interferes with the justice delivering process. These gaps highlight the need for a single, comprehensive international protocol that explicitly outlines the specific actions states must take in the events on conflict-related sexual violence. Such a protocol is essential to standardize immediate action and response mechanisms. But before we can even start, the first step must be action on part of the international community to secure the release of the hostages held by Hamas that are undergoing sexual violence as we speak.
Thank you, Tal. I think it was very important to hear from you, to give us, besides the personal stories, really a global overview of what happened on October 7, the cooperation that you try also to expand with international partner, and here also with UN mechanisms or international mechanisms. And it's food for thoughts, of course, for all of us on how we can better prevent and find justice and accountability for victims of sexual violence in time of war.